Welcome back to another video. This week we're going to look at color grading in Lightroom Classic. We're going to do a full rundown of how you can approach this. Now, a few weeks ago we did a video all about color correction, how you approach getting everything to where it should be in the photo within Lightroom. So this is getting your photo to look nice and natural, to affect things like exposure, color. I'll pop a link to that video in the description so you can go and check that out if you want to. But this week we're going to look at a photo, we're going to look at a portrait, and we're going to do a bit of a color grade. So this is affecting the colors to actually get a certain style, a certain look to your photo. Let's dive into it. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh, a lovely fresh photography tutorial. Let's dive into Lightroom Classic. We're going to work with this photo today, and I'm going to show you how we can actually approach color grading. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I love this. I love this so much. I love color grading, giving a certain look, a certain style. I will always look to do this where I can on a photo. Some people prefer to keep things very natural, which is completely fine. This is all art, right? It's all subjective. But I'm going to show you how I approach it and all of the tools I use to get that certain look, and then you can go wild with it. Let's take a look at where we go. So this photo, I think, is pretty much where it needs to be in terms of a starting point for working with the color, right? We've got good exposure here. We've got decent sort of color. Everything seems to be pretty much where it might be, but there's a couple of things I'm going to do to begin with. The first thing I like to do is actually just make sure my crop is where I want it to be. And I think for this photo, I'm actually just going to crop in a little bit. I don't need as much room around our subject here. Now, this was shot with a Rotolight light just off to the side. Let's go a little bit more like this, right? So this is shot with a Rotolight light just off to the side. It would be just off to the right as I look at this photo now. So somewhere over here onto our model. We've got another light over to the left, kind of filling in a little bit. The first thing I would always do in a situation like this is actually come to the white balance. I want to make sure that is as I want it to be before we start messing with colors. So in this situation, we've got it as shot. So the camera actually decided it was auto white balance. But I think we might want to add a little bit more magenta. And what I might do is actually come up here to the white balance and just click on auto and see what Lightroom would do. Okay, so Lightroom has actually decided the exact same thing, adding a little bit more magenta, really upped it quite a bit actually. I might bring that down to 25. I think that that looks pretty good. I think we've got nice skin tones. We've got a lot of green in this photo. Let's start working with it from more of a color grade. What I might do is actually just come in with a linear gradient and just bring this up from the bottom. What I want to do is just darken that a little bit, a little bit of a dark area down the bottom. It draws our eyes up to our subject. We want to actually bring it all the way to her face. I'm actually going to bring in a little bit of a radial gradient here, just brighten that face a touch, not too much. I think that looks pretty good. So, okay, we don't want to go too crazy with the initial edit. Let's look at the color grading. Now, we've already affected the white balance. I could warm this up, but I think for now I'm going to leave it as is. Let's move down here to the color mixer. Now, for me, this is where I'll do a lot of my color grading, right? This allows you to do two different things. You can use the mixer here, which is HSL. So you've got hue, saturation, and luminance. This allows you to affect each of those properties for the different color channels. So hue, for example, we could affect things like the oranges, the greens, the yellows to actually change that color a little bit. So in this photo, for example, we could come down to green and we could move that over towards yellow. I guess a little bit summery, almost a little bit autumny feel to that backing. We can change the yellow. We could bring that down towards the oranges, and look at that. You get a much more kind of autumny feel to things. We can double click to reset those. If we affect orange, that's going to really mess with her skin tones, which we don't really want to do. That's the hue. The saturation, again, we can come in. Let's look at the greens. We could bring that right down. We could affect that individually for each channel. And with the luminance, that's affecting things like the brightness of the different color channels. Obviously, in this photo, green is going to be a huge part of it. I probably don't need to tell you that, do I? Yellow is going to be a big part of it as well. That's a really important aspect of how we can affect this photo. The other part of the color mixer we can look at is the point color, which allows us to actually pick a color in the photo. So let's pick the green in her top here. And then we can actually move this around. So we've got a point here for where this color is. We can actually move that point, and you can see I'm now changing the color of her top. And I can do that pretty much as I like, or I can use these sliders down here to really affect that color in a really meaningful way, which is really, really nice. Now I can also affect the range. So at the moment we've selected that one color, but by expanding the range, so just increasing that slider, we actually expand how much color around the exact color we picked we are actually affecting when we move this around. Really useful in this situation for, let's say, affecting her top the way we might want to, like that. Now we can quickly reset that. Let's actually delete that actual color. So we can come up here to this color, right click, delete swatch, right? We'll come back to that in a minute. For me, that's the main way that I'm going to color grade my image. But we do have a different panel called color grading. And this one allows us to add color to different parts of the photo. So we can add color to the shadows, to the midtones, and to the highlights. A very easy and pretty straightforward way to do that, for example, would be to add a bit of blue or teal to the shadows and a bit of orange to the midtones and the highlights to give you kind of an orange and teal look to your photo, to give you a little bit of warmth in those highlights, a little bit of depth to the image. That can be a nice way to do it. Let's actually just go ahead and start color grading this image the way we want to do it. So for me, I do want to reduce these greens a little bit. I want to actually come to the hue here. I want to just bring the greens down towards the yellow. Not crazy, but just a little bit. I'm also going to bring the yellows towards the oranges a little bit because I want to warm up this area behind our subject. Now, in terms of the oranges, I'm not going to do anything crazy. I might just bring the oranges down a tiny bit. We don't want to go too crazy. It's going to affect our skin tone if we do. And we certainly don't want to do that. I think that initially looks pretty good. We might come over to the saturation as well. I think I want to bring some of the saturation out of this green. I just think that it's pulling focus away from our subject. That looks much better to my eye. Maybe we want to go for something like that. I might even bring the yellows down a little bit as well. I don't really want to mess with the luminance too much, and I don't think I really need to do much with the blues. I could just bring the blues towards the kind of more, I guess, teal side of things. That's going to mostly affect her jeans. I think that actually looks pretty good. We can always see a before and after by pressing the / key on the keyboard. So this is where we started. This is where we are now. So you can see immediately we've reduced the saturation of the image. So it's come down quite a bit. We've lightened some areas. We've drawn focus to our subject's face a little bit. But I like the direction we're going in so far, right? Let's come over to the point color. Let's select her top. So let's actually select that color that we were messing with a second ago. Let's take a look at this. So I think I'm going to bring the saturation down just a little bit. I think I want to bring the hue over towards maybe more of a blue. It depends where I want to go with this. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe I want to bring it to something like that. Maybe bring that saturation down just a little bit. I'm going to bring the luminance up just a touch. I want to make sure that she is more prominent than the background. And we have got some brightness in the background, which we might affect in a moment. Let's now take a look at the color grading and see what we think about this. We can pick multiple colors to affect with the point color. So let's see how we feel about doing something on the forest floor here. Let's go ahead and pick something like this. If we bring this over like that, or maybe like that, yeah, we can kind of earth this up a little bit. So let's bring that over there. Don't need to really affect the saturation too much, and maybe just darken it a touch as well. I think that looks pretty good. Let's come down to the color grading, where I'm going to try what we spoke about, right? A little bit of blue in the shadows, a little bit of orange in the midtones, a little bit of orange in the highlights. What do we think about this? So if I turn that particular panel on and off, it's a pretty subtle difference. You can do that by just clicking and holding on this eye icon on this panel. I think that looks pretty good. You know what we're going to do? We're going to leave that on for now, and we might come back to it. Let's come down here. I don't think we really need to do much else here, but another panel I will use for color grading is the calibration panel at the bottom. So I'll generally mess around with the 3 different primaries here, right? Red primary, green primary, and blue primary. And they work in ways you might not always fully expect. So the red primary, for example, I might pull over towards the oranges a little bit. Right now, that is going to affect her skin tone. The blue primary, I'm going to bring over towards the teal. That's going to give us a certain look. Now, do I like what I've done there? I don't know if I do. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reset those because I don't think I like what kind of the effect that gave to the photo. And that's okay. Sometimes it is a bit of trial and error, moving sliders around, trying things out and seeing what happens. The green primary, we could affect a little bit. Do you know what I might do? I might do something like that. I think that looks quite nice to my eye. Let's actually just turn that panel off and back on. Nice. I think that actually the truth is what we've done is slightly undone some of the other work we did up top by bringing that over. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to get to where you get to, whichever way you get there, right? And I think that working through these different panels is a good way to do that. So, okay, let's go back over to the mixer here. Do we want to affect this forest behind our subject any more than we already have? Well, we could actually use some masks to do some different work here. So for example, let's create a new mask here. Let's go linear gradient. I'm going to bring another one up from the bottom, something like this. And I want to really feather this out. So let's do something like this. I'm going to right click, intersect mask with, select background. Now what that's going to do is Lightroom's going to work out where the subject is, which of course is our model here, and then only apply that linear gradient to anything which isn't her, which you can see it's done really well there. Now, if I darken this mask a little bit, you can see that that kind of darkens this forest floor a little bit. And we just get a little bit of a pop of our subject, which I really like. I might do one more radial gradient, kind of a reasonably big one just over our subject, just brighten that a little bit. And then I'll do one more radial gradient, nice big mask like this, invert it. And we'll add a little bit of a vignette, something like that. Nothing too crazy. But I think that's looking pretty good. Let's look at the before and after. So we press the backslash key. This is where the photo was when we started. This is straight out of camera. This is where we've got it to. So you can see we have really affected a lot there. The exposure, but also the color grading. So the colors are really quite different to how they were when we started. Now, what's important about that is that we've maintained skin tones, which I think is really important. And I think we've tried to stay true to the feeling of the photo. So this isn't as natural as in the video where we try to color correction. This is a little bit further than that, but it is certainly a style, right? We've gone for a very specific style for the photo. Another way you can do this, and something which I like to play around with, and I've mentioned this in other videos, is to come over here to the left and look at some of these presets that are available to you. So you can look at some of these cinematic ones, for example. They're a much, much more intense way of color grading a photo, right? This is a style which is going to be applied, and it is at maximum kind of application, right? This is a fully applied at 100%, which we can adjust. So I like to do this sometimes to give me some thoughts about how I might want to approach things, right? So some of these are a little bit less intense than others. But for example, this folder here, Style Cinematic, this just comes in Lightroom, so it's available to everyone. Let's pick CN03, for example, right? That is a pretty intense color grade, a pretty intense stylization of the photo. Too much, probably. Well, we can come up here to this amount slider and actually bring this down, and it's going to affect how much that's applied. Now, personally, for me, this photo, it doesn't really work. So I'm going to press Control Z. That's going to take it back to the amount this preset is applied at 100%. And press Control Z again to undo applying that preset. Personally, I like where we've got to here, and we can still go back and affect things like the white balance. So if we want to, we can bring some of that magenta back out. Maybe it does look better, a little bit like that. We could bring in now new mask, like a linear gradient coming in. Let's bring one in from the right like that. Almost where that light's coming in. Just brighten that. A little bit of negative dehaze. Just guides where the light is falling onto our model there. I really like that. I like where we've got to with this photo. Let's do one final before and after. So this was where the photo was straight out of camera. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. You might say to yourself, do you know what? I prefer it straight out of camera. I like the look of this. And I think you're onto something. I really like the look of this as well. But I do like to play around with the colors, to see where we can get to see what we can do. And those are the tools that I'll use, generally speaking. So the mixer, so the HSL, the hue, saturation, and luminance, the point color, the color grading. I won't use that every time, but I will have a little bit of a play with that. And then the calibration as well. Again, not every time, but certainly here and there. Now, I'll generally apply these techniques to landscape photos, to portrait photos, to try and guide my viewer's eye to the point of the photo that I want to be the anchor point, but also just to stylize some of my photos. Sometimes I want a natural look. Sometimes I do want a more stylized, interesting look to my photo. It all depends on what the photo is, right? What the story is, the vibe, the feeling I want to get from the photo, and does the color grade serve the photo? That'll often be something that I'll be thinking about. So this one, for example, I wanted to make sure that that green in the background wasn't so distracting, because out of camera, it is very very saturated, which is nice, but it might draw attention away, draw focus away from our subject, which is our model there. But I think that this really makes her skin tones pop and really allows her to be the standout part of the image, which I really like. Now, I'd love to know, is this something that you mess around with? Is there anything specific you think about when you approach color grading that we've not even touched on here? Because this is such a subjective part of photo editing that everyone has slightly different ways of doing it, right? Maybe there's a specific tool that you use that we've not even really talked about. I mean, for example, the tone curve is a really useful tool when it comes to this kind of stuff. And we've not even looked at that in this video. We'll probably do a full video just on the tone curve as well, because I think that is a really useful tool for exposure and for color as well. So we'll take a proper look at that. But I'd also like to know if there's anything specific you'd like to see in a future tutorial Tuesday. I want to make sure I'm making the stuff you guys want to see, so that's always useful. Let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, you can see a full list of the kit we used to take this photo, to shoot this video, all that fun stuff down in the description of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, there's new stuff all the time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.